poverty and diseases. They say you're no worse than I. It seems as I could to see I lie. My Sibamba then is Allah. Pagama Africa, Pagama, Pagama, Pagama Africa.
2, 2, 2, 2, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. 2, 2, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2, 2. 1, 2, 3. Ndibo. 2, 2. Yeah, hopeless take it free. 2, 2, 2. So it should go through. 1, 2, 1, 2. So someone.
Tell me you love me again. Tell me, baby.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I please ask again that please sit on the tables that the ushers have shown you to sit on. And please let us get to our tables and be seated. The minister will be approaching any time from now. We don't want them mixed up on the tables because all the tables, they are arranged according to a sitting plan. So please sit where the ushers have directed you. Ladies and gentlemen, may I please ask you to rise? The minister is coming in. We may be seated. Minister of Defense and Military Veterans, Menosipiwe Mavisa Ngakula, Chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Defense, Mr. Sikaba, members of the Portfolio Committee on Defense, Chairperson of the Ministerial Task Team, Mempumulwana, members of the MTT, Chairperson of the Service Commission, Mr. I. Robertson, and the Military Ombud, Lieutenant General Retired Masondo, our Secretary for Defense, being presented here today by Dr. Gamede, the Chief of the South African National Defense Force, General Shoke, Chief of Staff of the South African National Defense Force, Lieutenant General Yam, members of the Plenary Defense Staff Council, members of the Command Council, generals and admirals, members of the media, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I bid you a hearty welcome this morning. I just want to quickly outline our program before we proceed. We have quite a few in the midst of the COVID-19. Please let us be mindful and so that we can have a fruitful day. Before I proceed with the program, I just want to acknowledge that today it is the International Women's Day. So this event has not been held at a more befitting and appropriate time than this one. Without further ado, we would like to apologize immensely, maybe for the delays that we had in terms of time, but we couldn't do without. For your benefit, I am Major General Nomsam Kize. I will be your program director for today. I am now going to request the chaplain to please step forward to give us the benediction.
Mission to conduct Her Honorable Mamanosfiwe Mapisa Ngakula, to our Secretary for Defense, the Chief of the South African National Ministerial Task Team, Mama Mpumlwana, the Chairperson of the Defense Committee, to all our service, fully so, and say good morning to everybody. I have said the right thing. Good morning to everybody. Much better. Let me acknowledge and respect all the expressions of faith that are with us this morning. The program director has instructed me to do the benediction. This is how my benediction will unfold. The last time I stood in front of the Ministerial Task Team and the Military Command Council, I reminded everybody that it has been the message of the Chief of the South African National Defence Force to the Military Command Council that all committees or task teams that has been established outside the military environment, but looking and investigating or working on military issues, be it the Ombud, be it the Defence Service Commission, be it the Ministerial Task Team, he ordered the Military Command Council to make sure that we treat them with respect, for they are a force multiplier in the Defence Force. That order was never withdrawn to date. Therefore, on that day, I spoke under a theme that says, it's time to break the silence. That theme emanated from the discourse of Esther and Mordecai in the scriptural book of the same name, Esther. What was encapsulated in that message was that we have been living with excruciating matters which were not brought to the open and are to the attention of the leadership at a very expedient time. That was saddening and heartbreaking. However, it became a curious era. What commenced with the establishment of the Ministerial Task Team, Honorable Minister of Defence and Military Veterans, has now brought a moment of truth, or the curious moment, to the Department of Defence. And I will also quote the Chief of the National Defence Force, who always reminds the Military Command Council that it is only the truth that will set us free. We are gathered here today to engage on several matters that, amongst others, include the Promotion of Access to Information Act and reports emanating from the work done by the MTT. A layperson can simply define information as something told, news or knowledge given or obtained from investigation, study or instruction, or a useful piece of information, whilst to some, information is considered as a fundamental building block of reality, along with matter and energy. Current information theory indicates that information can both be described as a bodily thing, bearing a changing element, in which the impact of information is inversely related to the probability that it will occur, versus the concept that information reflects the certainty of a message and is directly related to its probability and meaning. Coming to my scripture lesson this morning. It speaks about building boldness in our times. This comes from the second letter of Paul, where he says, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but a power and of love and of a sound mind." This message was given to a young preacher to encourage him on his role. Let me reflect about fear a little bit. Fear is a distressing emotion aroused by the impending danger, threat, or evil, whether the threat is real or imagined. It seems as if this young man was in the battle of a spirit of fear. And his coach says, "Speak the truth of the gospel with boldness." When fear takes over, people become paralyzed and ineffective, not because they don't have power, but because they stop action because of fear. This is an opportunity, the moment today of building for future generation with boldness and not arrogance. God does not want us to shrink back from doing our work courageously. Even in the face of opposition or persecution, God does not want us to shrink back from any duty He has given us in the earthly realm. As people of God gathered here today, there is this internal struggle happening, and that we are experiencing. However, if we are constantly being filled with the Spirit of God, we will be able to overcome the spirit of fear. There are three factors that I will briefly speak about out of what the coach of this young man spoken about. He speaks about power. Power. With it, we can influence things constructively. The power to cope, the power to shoulder the back-breaking task, the power to stand erect in the face of the shattering situations, the power to retain faith in the face of the soul-searing sorrows and the wounding disappointing. So, we should characteristically be an institution which can pass the breaking point and not break. Love. We should show all the organizational love that works like a glue to all our members, irrespective of challenges that we may be going through. The last one, the sound mind, militarily known as the self-discipline. It is God alone who can give us that self-mastery, which will keep us alike from being swept away and from running away. No human can ever rule others unless he or she has first mastered himself or herself. For that is a divinely given self-control which makes a person a great ruler of others because he or she is first of all the servant of God, the master of himself or herself. Out of this occasion, let us get out with one thing in mind, that we are going to build with courage and boldness our institution in our time. Whether we get out of this meeting with bruised egos or unseen scars, we are expected not to surrender due to timidity or fear of any nature. However, the Department of Defense has the national clarion call awaiting us to answer to it. And God is expecting us to do so whenever we are needed. For the purpose of this meeting today, may the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, be with us. Let us pray. We bow down, Heavenly Father, this morning with humility and with thanksgiving. We are thankful that Almighty God, the truth is going to be speaking over power. And that in a special way, work in our minds, in our hearts, in our souls, that we must accept the truth as the truth, nothing else but the truth. Battle lines are going to be drawn, as you have done also in your temple one day. All this we ask in your holy name, and may all the people of God say amen. That was my
As I prepare General Mure to approach the podium, today is about the launch of the Ministerial Task Team report. When the minister realized that she had a problem within the Department of Defense, she then took it upon herself to make sure that she gets into the depth of it, to get to find out what is happening in her organization. And she then put up this committee, this task team. So I'm not going to get into that. General Mure will take us through. What is important today is that the minister is saying, together with all the members of the South African National Defence Force, we are taking a zero tolerance on all sexual misconduct within the department. And this is what you want to see being implemented and effected. General Mure, if you may please come forward to do a formal welcoming of all of our members.
Minister, may I proceed, please? Thank you very much. Minister of Defense and Military Veterans, Ms. Nosiviwe Mapisa Ngakula, Chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Defense, Mr. C. Kaba, who is joining us virtually, members of the Portfolio Committee of Defense, Chairperson of the Ministerial Task Team, Chairperson of the Ministerial Task Team, Ms. Mpumlwana, members of the MTT, which is the Ministerial Task Team, Chairperson of the Service Commission, Mr. I. Robertson, the Military Ombud, Lieutenant General Retired Masondo, Secretary of Defense in absentia, who is represented by Dr. Gamete, Chief of the South African National Defense Force, General Shoke, Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Yam, members of the Plenary Defense Staff Council, members of the Military Command Council, generals and admirals, members of the media, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Good morning. Thank you. I am Major General Mori, Chief Director, Transformation Management. Thank you for joining us at this launch session of the findings and recommendations of the Ministerial Task Team addressing sexual exploitation abuse, sexual offenses, and sexual harassment in the South African National Defense Force. It's quite a big, all these big words, but I think you will understand them when the chairperson talks about them. Before I can introduce why we are here, I would like to express my sincere appreciation to all of you who generously helped us make this event come together to become a success, because already I can see that this is a success. We couldn't have done it without you. I would also like to remind, like what our program director indicated, that we are celebrating International Women's Day. Women of the world want and deserve an equal future free from stigma, stereotypes, and violence, a future that's sustainable, peaceful, with equal rights and opportunities for all. To get us there, the world needs women, and at every table where decisions are being made. This year, the theme of the International Women's Day is open quote, Women in Leadership, Achieving an Equal Future in a COVID-19 World, close quote. And that is the UN theme. It celebrates the tremendous efforts by women and girls, the world, in shaping a more equal future and recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, and highlights the gaps that remain. To be exact, on the 8th of 2019, a group of non-commissioned officers, junior officers, met with the Honorable Minister and a lot was discussed thereafter. In the same afternoon, all women generals had an opportunity to interact with the minister. After the two meetings, the minister then set a ministerial task team consisting of Ms. NFT Mpumulwana, she was the chairperson, or she's the chairperson, and Dr. Guma as a stakeholder liaison, Major General T. Nodola, who retired, who also was part of this, Ms. Rodman, Legal and Research, and we had, last one is Professor Hendricks, who did the report writing. But they were not just doing this alone. We had an extra 5 members who joined them and assisted the group to be able to come up with all what is going to be discussed today. And the MTT the function was that the minister issued, during that time, the minister issued a communique to all DOD personnel to cooperate with the process. That was extremely useful in opening doors for the MTT, because if Chief of the Defense Force didn't accept it, they were not going to be able to go to these bases and units and be able to interact with the members. But with the blessing of Chief of the National Defense Force also, they managed to be able to complete this. So a very warm welcome to each and every one of you. If you have any questions, suggestions, clarifications, you will get the opportunity to do so at the right time. Thank you, thank you, thank you for joining us, and thank you for also listening to me as Chief Director, Transformation Management. I wish you well in this meeting, and thank you, Minister, for allowing me to do the opening remarks. I nearly forgot our members that are joining us for virtually. I've got a list of them that I was given. The other one is the one from the Foundation of Human Rights, which is Yasmin Suka, and we have Father Mkachwa from the Moral Regeneration Movement. We also have Dr. O. Shisano from the Presidency, and also C. Aba from the Portfolio Committee. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you, thank you, Program Director.
Proceed to the chairperson of the MTT, who's going to run down the report for us. I am trusting that we are good to go. I'm going to now request Mrs. T. Mpumlwana to please come forward. Is it this? Thank you, Program Director. Finally, we are here, Minister. Let me just do this to do it right. Allow me to acknowledge everyone who is here, Minister, Chief, SANDF, representative of the SecDef. Online we have, as we have been told, we have the chair of the Portfolio Committee,
Also online, we have the representative of the UN, Miss N, and we also have many other people online and the representative of the presidency. Because of time, my presentation is not short, so please bear with me. I'm not going to go through the list of the people who are here. I'm going to use the language of South Africans, all protocol observe. Before I even start with my presentation, allow me to just say we are glad that we have come this far as the Ministerial Task Team. Just to say, we came, we listened, we reflected, we cried, we laughed, we left our families, and we are now presenting the report that is based on the work that we did. Initially, the minister thought it was going to be a short time, but it became very difficult. So I'm going to go straight to the slides that we have. The General More has already given us the title of this Ministerial Task Team. We were asked to address sexual exploitation, abuse, and offenses, and sexual harassment in the Department of Defense. And the presentation will follow that format. It says a little bit about today, about the National Action Plan, and then it's got key issues and findings, and then it's got recommendations. It also says something about what already has been put in place and areas that need to be addressed urgently. We have already been told, I'm going to run through it, that we were established in December 2019, and we finished our term on the 31st December 2020. The terms of reference are all written there, but in a nutshell, if I were to summarize them, the minister asked us to look at the department with objective eyes and to look at the reporting, the management, and finalization of cases of sexual harassment, abuse, and exploitation within the department, internally in South Africa, and also where members of the Defense Force are deployed externally. We also had to look at the legislation that prevails and to make proposals on what we can do about that. We also had to look at why do people not report? The minister did say that she keeps getting messages that we don't report, we're afraid. She says, find out why people don't report. She also said to us, establish a hotline for victims, and I hope that hotline will be permanent. And then she said, help me to also assist the department to establish a concrete victim support and protection system. Now we have already, friends, ladies and gentlemen, shared this report. Internally, most of the internal stakeholders are aware of most of our findings, but we are now coming out publicly with the report. We have been receiving a lot of requests, especially from the media, talk, and we have been telling them we can't. It's not our report, it belongs to the minister and the department. So we would like to thank the department for all the support. I'll do the further acknowledgements at the end. So we are just giving a snapshot of the finding. The report is long, and the report is 100-something pages, and we will present it to the minister. Next slide is that of the Ministerial Task Team members. Myself as the chair, Dr. Guma, retired Major General Tandweno Dola, Ms. Britta Rotman. Maybe our task team members should just stand so that at least we know who they are. Please, members, if you don't mind. Dr. Guma over there. Where is General Nodola? Where are you? Over there. Ms. Rotman over there. Professor Hendricks over there. That's the group. And then we wanted to contextualize this report. The minister, we were very happy when the minister chose this day because it's appropriate. Today is International Women's Day, and I think the theme has already been talked about. It's about achieving an equal future in COVID-19 world. Now, please note that the journey of transformation in South Africa is a long journey. We are all continuing to craft this nation, and so transformation, all institutions are expected to transform. So 8th of March is regarded globally, so the whole world, people are looking at where they are in terms of women's rights, achievements, and also highlight areas where there are still challenges. So also we have a national action plan for women, peace and security that the minister, those 3 ministers in that picture have been core in assisting that we craft as a nation. It was produced in 2019, adopted by Cabinet in 2020, and the byline is peace and security for women in all their diversity. And what we are doing is within that framework of many instruments that seek to do that. Then the minister involved there would be our Minister of Defense and Military Veterans, the Minister of DECO, and the Minister of Women. So those pictures are just trying to show you that this work is being supported and encouraged by many others who really wish us well as a department. And those are the objectives. I'm not going to read them because of time, of the Women, Peace and Security. It will be launched properly, but I just want I want to highlight just 2 of them. That is to ensure full and meaningful participation of women in peace and security processes, in structures and institutions. So DOD, whose function is to create peace within the country and in areas where we deploy our military personnel, also in their diversity, including women. That is why we have found it important to mention the Women, Peace and Security instruments. So what are the issues that are key? We want you to also note that the byline that we chose for our work as we leave you is a defense force that cares. This is what we would like to leave you with, to say our report is presented within the context of saying we urge you to continue and to build a spirit of a defense force that cares. Now, what are the key issues? We accept that as a nation, not long ago, before 1994, we were an outcast. We came back under our constitutional framework, which says we are coming back as part of the human race in the world. And so we operate under those protocols. And Parliament is there as well to ensure that indeed those protocols, international, regionally and nationally, are adhered to. And we also commit to do that. The Constitution of the Republic promotes that, I quote, we should have human dignity, achievement and advancement of human rights and freedoms, and also non-racialism and non-sexism. So DOD works within that framework. We also know that SANDF, as a primary focus of this report, works within that framework. We also note that we have on file a number of very, very good reports and pieces of legislation and policies that guide us. And all of them promote inclusivity. The challenge is implementation. We also want to say it up front as MTT, that don't feel bad that we have written a report that found stuff everywhere in South Africa, even in our homes. Everyone is dealing with the issue of sexual misconduct, sexual predators in families and institutions. So you are not unique. We want you to know that. All we are asking you to do is to be open to making it known in action and in deed that there'll be zero tolerance, as we have heard already. We thank you for opening yourselves up for scrutiny. We engaged with many stakeholders, and we thank them for giving their time and being open to confronting issues. We thank you for your willingness to deal with sexual misconduct. And we also thank you for already having started to implement some issues as we start presenting this report. We also note that a context of vulnerability remains with women soldiers, mainly in DOD, and in one in which unwanted and inappropriate sexual behavior happens wittingly or unwittingly. We also note that the legislation that prevails is not adequate in terms of the sentences that must be meted out. And we know that the military bill that was going to Parliament had tightened that up. But now your hands are tied so far, but we still ask you to act regardless, because just to give an example, for misconduct, generically, the 5,000 rand is the maximum you can pay for that type for misconduct, because everything is generically put under misconduct. We also we found that DOD has a culture that must be transformed, that is, and systems and processes that need a lot of work to change, and sometimes the culture promotes such, an example would be a culture of silence or a culture of fear, as it was said already by the general chaplain here. What are the other key issues quickly? The organizational culture. I will not get into that. The detail will be online if the report is released online, and in the major report. It is in the military ethos. We know that the military is the military. And so that ethos actually causes people to feel you are weak if you report on sexual misconduct. We want to say you are not weak, you are normal when you report a sexual misconduct, especially if you are a male. It's even worse if you are a male and you want to say you are violated in a military ethos. We also raise the issue of leadership. You will hear when we elaborate, we raise the issue of professionalism. We raise the issue of gender mainstreaming being core in the work that we do, looking at policies and structures, the legal structure and the legal system in the military being revamped, the issues of discipline versus criminal acts, the Integrated Justice System Board, the definition of sexual exploitation and abuse within the South African context and within the UN operations. We found that there is a disjuncture that needs to be discussed. The issue of paternity, where we have babies that we left at our areas of deployment, and we raise some issues. You'll see recommendations, the issue of data and knowledge management, training and sensitization, the use of board of inquiries, the reserve force system, and also PSETs. And we just wanted to give you that picture to show that we are proud of where you are as the Defense Force and the department by showing you that picture and reminding you that you have those soldiers, and we ask you to be a defense force that cares for them and builds them. Key findings, and I think I've really tried as much as to combine the two. Some women in DOD do not feel supported, and they've come forward to us to say, we need more support when we report such matters. We are afraid. And also, we have also raised the issue of patriarchy. And we have also heard from some LGBTQI plus is generally absent, is not talked about, but you've got human beings. Deal with it and be open to that. The lacks or non-punishment of transgression we feel still exist. Please deal with it. Deal with the sentences that are light, but we think that will even be enhanced with the issue of the military bill. The current system of concentrating on the perpetrator will punish the perpetrator to the light, but we think that will even be enhanced with the issue of the military bill. The current system of concentrating on the perpetrator will punish the perpetrator to the exclusion of we will care for the victim is problematic. There are hotlines, we agree, but we have addressed ourselves to a hotline that deals with sexual misconduct. We highlighted that there is no coordination of systems as you deal with, and we think that they are not adequately resourced, and we have a recommendation. And we also say maybe you need to take more advantage of the digital age. We're not saying you have not started, but we think accelerate the issue of digital advancements. Sexual harassment policy, we found that there wasn't one sexual harassment, there were sexual harassment policies, and a draft was in place, and we looked at the draft, and it's there now. We will recommend again in that regard, and the ethics policy. SecDef, the issue of fraternization, it's a term that is used, but different understandings. Please make sure that people are, in terms of my profession, and I'm being asked to reveal certain information so that some other processes of discipline should proceed. I never know where now I should go. And was saying, sit down and have clear rules of how to govern behavior in that regard. Because indeed you may want the information, but do not cross the lines when it comes to professionalism. So rushing to recommendations, Minister and ladies and gentlemen. The first one that we put as the first one was that we acknowledge the role of the leadership that it has played, and we have worked very well with the leadership. But we said, if this is to change, everyone must hear now that there is a red line drawn. No more sexual misconduct and sexual predation in the Department of Defense and Military Veterans. And it must be said publicly, and people must know that those are the marching orders going forward. And so, going to the past, fine, you acknowledge that that has happened. And no sweeping under the carpets, because that has happened. So that will have to be communicated. How you do that, we leave it to you. Culture, there must be a way. But we have, on this one, we are not saying be a weak department, especially Defense Force. We're not saying so. We say you must be a Defense Force that cares, of strong women and men, strong professionals that are here for a purpose, that know that there are things you do and things you don't do here. That will also include zero tolerance. But professionalism should prevail here. Consequence management. People must know that even if it's my friend or my colleague or my boss, I have a right to report. Even if I know adopt centers where we work of orphans and vulnerable. This area does not mean necessarily money, but it just means to find a space, because mainly in the DRC, where we can go as SANDF to show that we are a defense force that can.
Chairperson of the MTT, we thank you very much for this comprehensive report that you have just given. I would like to acknowledge right now in our presence the Honorable Kenny Mutsamai, the Member of Parliament, and also is part of the Portfolio Committee on Defense and Military Veterans, and everybody else that just came in after our welcoming was done. You are welcome and appreciated this morning. I am going to respectfully request that if anyone really has an emergency of a body break, really without causing any sin, please make your way to where you need to be and then join us again. But soon we are going to have a break, I can promise you that one. We are now going to proceed with our program. I am now going to request various members that are going to do acknowledgement and commitment to the report that has just been given to us in terms of how they are accepting the report, which is very key in terms of what we are doing today. The first person is going to be the representative of the Secretary for Defense, Dr. Gamede. If you may please come forward and do the acknowledgement and commitment for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I would like first to thank the Minister for giving me this opportunity, Minister of Defense and military veterans. In our midst, I can also see that there is the Chief, I greet you, the Chair of the MPT, I greet you. There are also members from the defense family. I see there and I acknowledge the Chair of the Defense Service Commission, and I saw the CEO of AMSCO, and also the Military Ombud sitting there. And over and above, I want to acknowledge members of the military command, members of the military command, as well as the PDSC. I am here to represent the SecDef. I am here to acknowledge the report and to make a commitment. Now, I'm making a commitment on behalf of the SecDef, but I'm also making a commitment on behalf of the department at large, Minister. My name is Tobegile Kamede. I'm the Chief of Defense Policy Strategy and Planning. So this is befitting for me to even stand here, because the implementation of this report will require coordination. It will require structure. We need to do it in a structured manner. We need to be systematic about it. But most of all, we need to make sure that we put in place a monitoring and evaluation, a plan, because without monitoring and evaluation, the minister will not know the progress. I have listened to the recommendations. We had a briefing this week, and if you look at the recommendations, some of those will require long-term, and some can be done in the short term, and some can be done medium to long term. Obviously, over and above that, when you look at the recommendations, some will require resources, and therefore it means there will have to be some kind of prioritization within the department if this has to work. If this has to work, obviously, Minister, what this report does on the day of International Women's Day is that it helps the women in defense. I don't want to say in the national, in our defense force. I want to say the women in defense, because you have civilian women in defense. It will help them to work in an environment that is free of fear, in an environment that is free of any type of abuse, especially sexual abuse, sexual harassment. But most of all, what it does is it says to us, the minister listened, and the minister realized that the voices of the women who reported the cases were not heard properly. And therefore, in order to make sure that we are systemic in what we do in addressing the scourge of abuse and sexual harassment, we have the basis, which is this report. It has not been distributed widely, but it will need us as senior members of the DOD to sit back, to reflect, not to be defensive, and to say, here we are at this time? What do we do to create a culture where women are not afraid to report, where women know that when they report, they'll be listened to, they will be not ostracized, they will not be seen as troublemakers. As a senior woman in defense, I can tell you, although there is a stigma that as some find themselves in a position where they have to sleep themselves, sleep their way to the top. It might be true in some instances, maybe very little and isolated instances. And I'm standing here and I assure you, I did not sleep my way to the top. I'm very clear. So sometimes these things happen and they cast doubt on all women, as if you are there because you slept your way to the top. So I want to say it can happen, but most women are here on merit. They are here because they are bright. They are here because they are brave. And they are not the only ones. You know women in history. You know Mkabayi. She was a kingmaker. She would punish her brothers. You know Mantatise, who led the battles. So women in defense should not feel as if they are promoted, it's a favor. It's not a favor. They can fight, they can hold those guns, and they are brilliant. Thank you very much. Minister, I assure you, we will implement the recommendations. It might take time, but we will have to come back to you with concrete plans of how we are going to do it, as well as how this is going to be monitored. Thank you very much. And about the center, if that center happens, I volunteer to be an irritant in that center, just to be part of that center. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gamede. As you were coming in this morning, you were welcomed by delightful smells of coffee. The coffee is coming from Maishibe Coffee. That is produced by Captain Maishibe Marima. She has served this coffee at the most difficult time when our soldiers were deployed for the first time in the winter of 2020 for COVID-19. Early in the morning, she was there to give them free coffee before they go on patrols and also in the evening. So we are very thankful for that. If you haven't tasted their coffee, please make time. And along with her is Lieutenant Colonel Maine, who is a Ghana, a commander in her own right, who has written a book that says, I will not lose. I think make time as well. She's got a stall out here where she is showing a book, how she has used the military to fight against a cancer that she found herself having to deal with. So with those members that are with us, I think please find time just to interact with those two members. We continue then with our program. Right now, I'm going to request the Chief of the South African National Defence Force, General Solushoke, to please approach us and to do his own commitment and acknowledgement of the report. Thank you, General.
the Minister of Defense, distinguished guests. I'm not going to mention anybody by name because you've been acknowledged. Allow me, Minister, to thank the Ministerial Task Team on SIA. We have met with the team on a number of occasions as the military command because, as you are aware, that the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa demands the Defence Force to be managed and be structured as a disciplined force. Therefore, we are bound by law at the South African National Defence Force to deal with any form of criminality, and will not tolerate that. And that is why in the military, we do have the military police, we have military courts, and military justice system. Yes, I must acknowledge that mistakes were made in the past. Maybe we're too excited about democracy when we amended the 1957 Defense Act, and we're trying to align ourselves with some of the democratic principles. But I think along the process, we did make some mistakes. And in the process, we removed some teeth in our military justice system. Hence, as a military command, we took the initiative to say we need to amend our acts and ensure that we get more teeth so that we can deal with any form of criminality, particularly when it involves sexual exploitation. I think you are aware, Minister, we did indicate to the Ministerial Task Team that we do have some Defence Force orders concerning the subject matter that we're discussing today here, to ensure that we deal with some criminals in our midst. And yes, indeed, it will be amiss of us not to admit that we do have some rotten elements in our midst, but they are a tiny minority. And then I'd like to indicate that all of us in uniform are volunteers. And we joined this organization fully knowing that we'll have to abide by the rules governing this institution, and particularly this creature called the Defence Force. Because as a South African National Defence Force, we're supposed to be a beacon of hope. Over 57 million people of this country rely on us for their safety and security. Therefore, it is unacceptable that an institution which the country relies on it for their safety, but yet in fact you find that people within our midst feel unsafe. It is totally unacceptable, and it is something that really we should not tolerate. And then I want to rest assure you, Minister, and the public at large, that we will never tolerate any wrongdoing, and will act against any wrongdoing in the Defence Force. That is for sure. Yes, there might be people who might feel offended, in fact, and don't come out. And it is unfortunate if, in fact, we've got such people. You know, I always tell people that, you know, there's one thing that I hate in life, is a coward. A coward, you know, in English there's a proverb that says a coward dies many times before they die, in fact, their actual death. If there's anybody who does anything wrong, stand up and be counted. Don't be a coward. Because to say you are afraid is not an excuse. That's an element of cowardice. And this institution is not an institution for the chicken-hearted. It's not an institution where, in fact, we should harbor cowards in our midst. It's an institution where we know that when you wake up in the morning and you go into your duty, you might not come back. That's the nature of our profession. Come out and say the truth. Face a person in the eye and say, you did A, B, C, D. And I don't want it. Because straight talk does not break any friendship. So I'm appealing to those of us, in fact, so of you in our midst, who feel aggrieved, in fact, and they keep quiet, that they should come out. It is better to say, I reported this matter to so and so, and he has failed me, than to keep quiet and say, I failed you. How will I fail you if I don't know what has happened to you? We're here as commanders to ensure that we treat people fairly. But yes, we've got to be firm, but fair. And there's a difference between firmness and cruelty. We should not be cruel. But this institution, you need to be fair to everybody, and you need to be firm if we are to command this organization as a disciplined defense force. So, Minister, I'd like to say, on the behalf of the military command, we commit that actually will ensure that this defense force is a disciplined defense force and criminality will not be allowed in it. But there's one recommendation that I like, and then that I hope maybe members of the military ministerial trust team, together with the minister, will help me on that. I see you are speaking about orphanage and then the adoption of the elderly. Actually, I've got a lot of orphans in the defense force that I'm trying to raise rands and cents for them. And then I'm sure maybe the chaplain general will give you a pledge form so that, because I don't get money from government, I go cap in hand, raising rands and cents to ensure that orphans of members of the defense force who died the line of duty are able to go to school. So I'm sure now this August gathering, then of course our ministerial trust team, with small token of appreciation, if you can just maybe put a signature of your contribution towards our kids who need education badly. But without any few words of wait, I must just say thank you very much for the report. We accept it, and then we'll try our level best to implement it to the best of our abilities. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chief. We are now going to proceed and request the military ombudsman, General Masondo, to please approach this podium so that he can also do his own acknowledgement and commitment.
Thank you very much, Program Director. Honorable Minister of Defense and Military Veterans, Minister Nosiviwe Mapisa, the Honorable Deputy Minister of Defense in his absentia, the Chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Defense and Military Veterans, Honorable Klaba, and members of the committee, the Acting Secretary for Defense, Dr. Kamede, the Chief of the National Defense Force, General Shoke, the Chairman of the Defense Service Commission, Defense Service Commission, the Chairperson of the Ministerial Task Team, and members of the team, members of the Plenary Defense Staff Council and the Military Command Council and Secretariat, the Service and Division Chiefs, Generals and Admirals, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Please allow me to commence by conveying my appreciation and saluting the Minister for establishing the Ministerial Task Team. Minister, in doing this, you have shown leadership, because I've served in the defense. I'm aware that we were receiving many allegations of sexual abuse and exploitation. However, we were very much constrained in dealing with these effectively at the time, because some of the allegations were not specific to the extent that we could actually do something about it. But by establishing the Ministerial Task Team, we have shown to be the mother of the department who cares, and therefore, as a department, we have to follow in your footsteps. It's been said that it's befitting that this report of the Ministerial Task Team is launched on the International Women's Day. And the significance of this is in the fact that, unfortunately, the SANDF has been notorious in terms of our deployment areas, where we are flagged by the United Nations as one of those nations that are actually leading in sexual exploitation and abuse. We're privileged as my office to meet with the Ministerial Task Team shortly after their appointment, to be precise on the 16th of January last year, where we had a very fruitful meeting. And of course, as an office, we pledged our support to their work. It is thus gratifying that we're at a point that the Ministerial Task Team, after a lot of work, are able to table their recommendations. And in fact, I like the fact that, leadership is one of the recommended actions. Because if as leaders we don't lead by example, we create an environment where those who are abused are not free to approach us to actually resolve their problems. Minister, I want to say my office was created to deal with complaints from members and former members of the SANDF about their conditions of service, including members of the public about the behavior or the official conduct of members of the Defence Force. And I thus want to indicate that in some of the complaints that we receive as an office, it is implied that, for instance, members' careers are not developing as they should because they refuse sexual advances from some of the leading members in the SANDF. Chiefs, I'm happy that you are saying you don't like cowards, but in the same breath, you are charged with the responsibility to create an environment where members who are victims of abuse actually feel free to be able to report this, which therefore comes to the recommendation in terms of creating the type of culture that would allow members of the Defence Force to be able to freely approach the leadership and make sure that their complaints are addressed. It is unfortunate that we find ourselves with this kind of allegations because the SANDF is leading by example. It's one of the Defence Forces that has embraced the women, and therefore you find quite a number of women within the ranks of the organization, right up to the top, at the level of generals. And therefore the acts of the few individuals within the SANDF who engage in this type of behavior, they tarnish the good work that has been done by the SANDF. And this is more so also in terms of the operations that the SANDF is engaged with internationally under the auspices of the UN. Because there, the SANDF is a respected contributor to those missions. However, this act by few individuals within our ranks, therefore, besmirch that good name of the SANDF as a department. Minister, from my office, I want to indicate that immediately after we had a meeting with the Ministerial task team and were informed of the hotline where victims of abuse can utilize and to report this, I immediately made sure that that hotline is made visible in my office and that members can actually, if faced with a sketch, be able to report any misdemeanor in this regard. My office is composed of, has many female members, and there's men who are very few. There were an endangered species in that environment. But I can assure you, Minister, that we've created the kind of environment where the female colleagues who work with us understand fully well that we respect them as the flowers of our nation, and where we deviate from this, stern action is taken. I therefore want to acknowledge and support the report of the ministerial team and commit as an office that will do everything possible to make sure that we support the implementation, particularly of the recommendations that have been made. And I must say it's encouraging to me that actually there measures that have already been taken to implement some of the recommended actions. And on that note, therefore, I want to thank the Minister for inviting me to represent my office at this August gathering, and I assure everybody that my office remains committed to the report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Military Ombud, for your acknowledgement. We will now proceed to receive the acknowledgement from the Defence Force Service Commission. I'm now going to request Mr. Robertson to please come forward.
Thank you. Morning, everyone. Morning, Minister. You know, it's very difficult sometimes to follow in the footsteps of a former Chief of Staff because they always follow protocol to the T. If you allow me, I'm going to take the lead of the Chief of the SANDF to acknowledge yourself, Minister, to acknowledge the Chief of the SANDF, to acknowledge the Chief of Staff, to acknowledge Chiefs of Services and Divisions, and members of the Ministerial Task Team, and other invited guests. Minister, we really thank you for establishing the task team, getting it off the ground, because I think some of the issues that you have been acquainted with over the years as Minister of Defence, you've come to realize that you needed this task team to unpack some of the difficulties and acknowledge also what the Chief General Shock is saying, that people need to come forward. So in a sense, this is opening up the way. But it's also important that we release the document today, the 8th of March. In my little notes I was making yesterday, because I tend to forget sometimes. Sometimes I speak off the cuff and I forget, so I make some notes. So yes, it's important that we have the international, released on International Women's Day. And also, whilst driving here this morning, I heard a snippet on 702. The advert was on 702 in relation to the release of the document. And the Minister would speak to that. As the Commission, as the Defence Force Service Commission, we interacted twice with members of the Sexual Abuse and Sexual Exploitation and Abuse Task Team. It was pity because it was during COVID, so we couldn't meet physically. So we met twice, we interacted, engaged with them. We also were part of a workshop that they conducted later on in the year. We gave our inputs. So for me, they've taken on board to some extent, not completely, because it would have been much better if we were able to interact physically, notwithstanding COVID issues. But nevertheless, you've taken on board some of the discussions that we had. As a Commission, and as the Chair responsible for moving forward on the issue, we will study the final report. I see there are 15 or so findings, maybe more. I counted 15. I'm sure there are many more than 15. We will examine the issues we think we can pick up on when we visit some of the bases, because our primary task is to go and not just visit headquarters, HQ, but also go down to grassroots level, visit bases, understand the issues at base level, notwithstanding COVID-19, but it looks like we might have a gap now, and we need to take advantage of it and try and understand some of the issues at grassroots level. During the first few months of the next financial year. We will also look at the implementation of the study's recommendations. I counted 17 recommendations, and I'm not sure whether they were in order of priority, but certainly for me the issue of leadership, Minister of Culture, of Chief of the SANDF. Culture is a big important one, because the way the military is structured, there's a particular culture around it. So we need to go down and drill down and unpack some of the recommendations, which we can then, when we're at base level, at unit level, we can see whether they, in fact, whether the recommendations are taken seriously by lower-ranking members of the military, as well as higher-ranking members of the military. We can include these in the report to the Minister, because ultimately we make findings on recommendations, we send it to the Minister, and the Minister then takes it forward. And finally, I would want to say, I also think it's important that I don't think it's too far-fetched. I don't think it's too idealistic to suggest that the recommendations within this report could be groundbreaking work and pioneering work for consideration by other defense forces within SADC region and certainly within the African continent. I think some of these issues, I think the task team has really thought deeply about it. They've interacted widely and deeply, and I think it might be very useful to, when time goes on, to interact and see whether other defense forces, certainly within our own region, within the SADC region, whether they're thinking along the same lines. But certainly, Minister, Chief of the SANDF, the task team, we take these recommendations seriously as a commission. We will, as I said, unpack them. We'll do our best to see what we can, as someone said, there are short, medium, and long-term recommendations. See which we think are the most useful ones, and then move forward on that. But certainly as a Defence Force Service Commission, we acknowledge, we accept, and we appreciate the report. Thank you very much, Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Robertson. We are moving right along. We are now going to have one last acknowledgement and commitment, which will be done virtually from the Portfolio Committee by Mr. Klava. If I could then have this arrangement in action. IT. All right. I am told that Mr. Kaba is awaiting from us to continue. He may please continue.
Hello. You hear me?
Yes.
Yes, no, thank you very much, Program Director. Honorable Minister, Deputy Minister, Honorable Chabang Makweka, Honorable members of the Defense Portfolio Committee, the chairperson and members of the Military Task Team, Secretary for Defense, Chief of the Defense Force, and all other generals present, heads and CEOs of entities and agencies present today. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the opportunity to make a few remarks. Today, the world is commemorating the International Women's Day. The commemoration of Women's Day once again reminds us of the gender-based crimes directed at women and the struggle they wage relentlessly against all forms of oppression. Their struggles are a struggle against human rights violations. We salute a brave character's fight to bring about a just society. Women continue to ignore harassment and other forms of injustice at their place of work. Despite governments across the globe enacting laws to curb this scourge, they still suffer at the hands of those in powerful positions. Unless these matters are investigated and exposed, a struggle will not be done. Ladies and gentlemen, military gender-based crimes world over have always been an issue. I thank the Minister for the courageous step she took to alert the public to a possible violation of women's rights and investigating the allegations within our own defense force. If she did not do that, the cloud would have continued to hang over the defense force and unjustifiably punish its standing, instead of placing blame where it belongs. Now we know the depth of their wrongs and will await the plan to deal with them. The recommendations are damning indeed. In the same breath, I commend you, Minister, for catching the proverbial bull by its horn and transforming the demography within the organization. The last decade saw women not only sweating the ranks of the defense forces and becoming women soldiers, but also being promoted to senior positions, not just as a token, but because they deserve positions. We met some of them as we crisscrossed the country, visiting some of the military bases. Some we met in their combat, sweating under the trees along our borderline. The countries that were able to advance the struggles of women achieved that because they adopted methods aimed at building an equal society. No country will succeed when she leaves the majority of her population in bondage and making people who would be contributing to its success abandoned. We welcome the report and assure the Minister that we'll work with her as she lifts up the flag of women and advance the women's struggles within the organization. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kaba. We are now going to proceed with a very reasonable speed through the messages of support. And right after the last message of support, we are then going to take a body break. I apologize if I have stretched you maybe a bit too far on this one. I am now going to request from the Commission on Gender Equality, Mr. M. Botha, to please approach to give us his message of support.
Good morning. We take the opportunity to greet the Minister of Defense and the Deputy Minister in absentia, the task team members, Sister O, for the sterling work that you have done. I just want to say that we as a Commission for Gender Equality is privileged to be part of this important occasion, Minister. And again, let me echo what most of the speakers have said, that it could not have been easy for you to be self-reflective, because more often than not, you would have chosen a different route, just to sweep it under the carpet. But you chose to be reflective and confront the elephant in the room. So we as a Commission, as a Chapter 9 institution, we support this report. We think that it's an important document. But having said that, Minister, it's important with your Deputy and the Chief of Staff, General Shoke, to say that the elephant in the room, it is us men. Minister, unless and until we take options that women don't rape themselves, women don't abuse themselves. I mean, in the defense force, it's important, Minister, for us to emphasize, General Shoke, that it is powerful men. It is powerful men in powerful positions. So it's about power. I hope that this report will not gather dust. This report, Minister, will be acted on. And it can only be acted on when members of the army, all of them, are of the view and feel that this is their report. There's an element of ownership, Minister, until and unless each and every member of the defense force feels that this report belongs to them. And it's not does not belong to some elite somewhere, Minister. It is only then that this report, its efficacy, will come under spotlight, or we will, as a Commission, be able to monitor and say, how far is it, Minister? What has happened? What has been happening? Where are the gaps? Where are the backlogs? Because as a Commission, our mandate is to ensure that we do a vigorous monitoring, Minister, to ensure that such important reports don't just end in offices and we tick a box. Minister, we must move away from the culture of just tick a box and feel good and pat ourselves in the back, because this report must affect the lives of women and men in the department, but women mainly, Minister. So I just want to say that we as a Commission want to urge you, Minister, to ensure that we in fact put the spotlight where it belongs, that it is men in your department who are senior, who have or who gravitate towards abusing, misusing the power that they have. And unless we confront, Minister, unless we confront the elephant in the room, we will not be able to put the recommendations of this committee into fruition. So I just want to say that the committee has done its job. The committee has done a sterling work. Now, it is up to those that are charged to ensure that its recommendations are in fact implemented as of yesterday, Minister. And we want to wish you well and wish the committee well, and thank you, Minister, for your leadership, that you chose, as I said earlier, to be self-reflective, because you could have chosen just to keep quiet. You could have chosen just to have an ostrich mentality. I mean, put your head in the sand and look the other way. And, you know, it becomes life as usual. As you know, during COVID, which is going to be with us for many, many years to come, it can't be business as usual. The same should apply to SANDF, that it can't be, General Shoke, business as usual. Men and women in particular, because it is them who are at the coalface of inequality. It is women, that is Shoke, who are at the receiving end of violence, at the receiving end of sexual behavior. So it is them that must be addressed, and we can only address all of these maladies, Minister, when we put the resources where they belong, and have a conversation, have serious conversations with men in the department, because it is them. And I want to emphasize that women don't abuse themselves, don't rape themselves. It is I and other men in uniform who misuse, abuse our powers. So, Minister, thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your vision. And Sis Chopo, I want to say to you and your team that you have done we have been part and parcel of this process. I can safely say that you did not put anything under the carpet. You're able to, in fact, engage in some of the uncomfortable conversations within the army. And I want to thank you, Minister. Good luck that your team has read this report. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We will proceed with another a virtual message of support from the Foundation for Human Rights by Yasmin Suka. You may continue. It looks like we're having a bit of a challenge right there. The next person is from the Moral Regeneration Movement, Father Mkachwa. He's also going to be giving us a message of support virtually. Father Mkachwa. So are we having a problem with the connection completely now from their side? And the next person is supposed also to be virtual from the UN Women. noticing that it looks like we've lost contact, Minister, with the members that are supposed to give us the messages of support. And the next item after these members is supposed to be the keynote address that should be rendered to us by the Minister. I'm not sure whether I should give it a few minutes, see if we can sort it out, or the Minister will the Minister, UN Women. Looks like we are going to connect with UN Women. My apologies to everyone. We are going to then welcome Professor Chisano, who's going to address us from the UN Women. Oh, from the presidents. So this is now the last speaker according to my program. Thank you very much. Professor Chisano, we are ready for you. Yes, Riva. Professor Chisano, if you may please proceed.
Minister Nosiviwe Mapisa Nyakuma, Deputy Minister Thabang Makwetla, Chairperson of the Ministerial Task Team, members of the Task Team, members of the Defence Force, senior members of the Defence Force, representatives of various stakeholders, ladies and gentlemen, Program Director. It's really a great honor for me to give a message of support to you all as we celebrate the International Women's Day, which is being held today. This day is a global day to celebrate women's achievement at the social, political, economic, and cultural level, while raising awareness for the need to accelerate efforts towards achieving gender equality at all levels. At a global level, the launch of the generation towards ensuring that this generation will ensure gender equality in their lifetime. It's a momentous day. After all, women make half of the global population and more than half in South Africa. Yet it often feels like we are forever coming up against things that prevent. The African Women's Decade of Financial and Economic Inclusion of African Women, that is 2020-2030, provides regional impetus to take the necessary action to remove all obstacles that stand in the way of full economic empowerment women in our society. The interventions at the global and regional level set a stage for us to continue to move the agenda towards gender equality and women's emancipation from patriarchy, misogyny, across homes, community, workplaces, as well as society. We need to do this decisively. As a country, we continue to battle with different kind of war, which is much driven by gender inequality and other forms of inequality, a war for the women and children of our country. In our homes, the bitter battles are in, and those who are being harmed are defenseless and rendered vulnerable by sexist attitudes and behaviors. To address this war, the President of South Africa, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, launched a national strategic plan on gender-based violence and femicide on the 30th of April last year as a national roadmap towards addressing the scourge that undermines human rights. Sexual and gender-based violence, including sexual harassment, exploitation, and abuse of women and children, rape, and other forms of violence, arise from a social and economic context that undervalues women, that does not recognize their labor and contribution, and entrenches values and norms that systematically exclude, invisibilize, and marginalize. Today, we are proud that the South African Defence Force too has played its role in operationalizing our national plan by embarking on its efforts to better understand and respond to sexual harassment and violence within its own ranks. Approach to gender-based violence, and the South African Defence Force has also a key role to play. On this International Women's Day, we can celebrate much about women in the Defence Force. First point, South Africa has been a trailblazer as one of the few militaries across the globe to have a woman defense minister at the honor of being the political head of the Department of Defense for 9 years, which includes the South African National Defence Force as the Minister of Defense and Military Veterans. Thank you so much for setting up the task team. And Minister, thank you for publicly releasing a report on gender-based violence in the Defence Force. The South African Defence Force, National Defence Force, has also achieved a female representation of 31%. That's my second point. These women are represented across traditionally male-dominated sectors such as fighter pilots, navigators on submarines, paratroopers, battlefield commanders, and generals. These transformative measures within the South African National Defence Force point to an awareness of and commitment to addressing gender inequality across the institution. My third point is that there are very few places left in the Defence Force that women have reached, and no area whatsoever to which they cannot aspire one day to hold, whether it's in the Chief of the South African National Defence Force or the Office of the Commander-in-Chief itself. My final point on the successes of the Defence Force really is overall as a country, we're immensely proud of this Defence Force, the fruits 27 years ago of the amalgamation of statutory and non-statutory forces. We welded liberation armies and the forces of their Defence Force. Marcy, my husband, was one of the people that participated in that particular process. But despite the many steps forward and how the SANDF has amassed glass ceilings, one area has continued to battle to transform properly. This is in the field of attitudes and behaviors, discrimination, especially sexual exploitation and harassment. This is to be expected at one level because defense is a microcosm of the broader society from which members come. Our soldiers were citizens before they were put on a uniform. They come from a nation beset by gender-based violence. It should come as no surprise then we face the same scourge within the ranks of the South. Does not mean we should accept this as the norm. Indeed, as a state structure that is tasked with protecting all living in South Africa, we in responding decisively to this war on women's bodies. In December 2019, the minister convened the Ministerial Task Team on Sexual Exploitation and Abuse, chaired by the able Ms. Tokum Pumlwana, assisted by a panel of experts, including a retired woman general. It is their report and the recommendations that we are launching this morning. My gratitude goes to this sterling effort to change the culture within our armed forces. As a society, we won the war against apartheid. We'll all remember that one. We'll never forget that one. We challenge racist values and belief systems. We challenge structures of power that perpetuated institutionalized racism. Now, we are doing about the same on sexual values and belief system and concerning structures of formal and informal power that perpetuate sexual abuse and discrimination. The composition of the team was deliberate. It was exciting that you had in a closed society like the Defense Force, you can only be navigated with inside knowledge and the access that comes with high rank. It was also critical to offset this with outsiders who have no history with the institution and whose only desire is to fulfill their mandate of getting to the bottom of the problem. The brief of the Ministerial Task Team was very clear. It was extensive and it was very much unprecedented. They were asked to review every case of sexual misconduct and check if there has been resolved. If the cases had been resolved, the team had to check the military sanction was as severe as the civilian sanction would have been. The team also checked on miscarriages of justice. They reviewed the military disciplinary code, the South African defense law, all of that against the civilian law. They had to test whether the military police were as good as their civilian counterparts, if they had the necessary technical training and emotional sensitivity to deal with cases of sexual assault. It's important that are taken seriously or just trivialized by the chain of command. The team completed their task under severe conditions, battling institutional prejudice and the global pandemic made face-to-face access very difficult. They persevered. They instituted a 24-hour toll-free victim emergency hotline. They checked all their findings against international best practice. They presented a set of findings that I believe will provide a blueprint to transform the South African National Defence Force into a caring and nurturing defence force without compromising its operational efficiency or effectiveness in keeping the peace and our nation's territorial sovereignty from any threat. We have learned vital and valuable lessons during this process. There's so much that defense has to do, including setting up a victim support center as the best practice, but equally, it has been refreshing and illuminating to get to the bottom of this field. The key to stopping gender-based violence overall, and specifically the manifestation of sexual harassment and sexual exploitation, is to change attitudes and behavior. We have to create a more open, more equal culture and radically change what has traditionally been a very masculine and often toxic environment. This is not a uniquely South African problem. The country as a whole has a far higher incidence of gender-based violence, and the South African National Defence Force experience in the base and deployment are not unique either. Militaries the world over are wrestling with precisely the same issues. Making war and keeping peace are two sides of the same coin. As such, all too often, they are the last bastion of toxic masculinity with potentially catastrophic consequences. This is something that the United Nations has highlighted and redlined as an abuse of population by troops on deployment. The UN has also noted our unique determination to grasp this problem and resolve it with great approval. Winning the war against gender-based violence is not just about workshopping policies and putting rules in place, because rules mean nothing unless there is a change in attitude. Rules mean nothing unless there's a consequence for misconduct, especially sexual misconduct. I was gratified to read that the MTT has found that of the 21 cases of sexual exploitation and assault reported to the South African National Defence Force, including allegations of rape, transactional sex, sexual abuse, and exploitative relationships during deployment, 15 of these cases have been finalized and 9 soldiers were dismissed. We have to congratulate them on this. Likewise, of the 36 cases sent to the MTT, reported initially between 2010 and 2019, only 4 remain unfinalized, of which 2 are ready for trial. It became clear that we need to understand too that sexual misconduct extends beyond specific forms of gender-based violence, such as rape, battery, as well as murder. It also includes sexual exploitation. Most of these cases in the DRC were consensual, but they were exploitative. Let's agree on that. Going forward, our soldiers need to understand that if we deploy a battalion of 300 on a year-long peacekeeping operation, and there are even 10 complaints of sexual exploitation of locals desperate to feed their families and private property, then we're through. As the military, as the country, we really have a zero tolerance, of this. I want to say in closing, let me assure you that this International Women's Day, there is no place for sexual predators in the South African national. They will be found out. They will be caught. We'll do this without fear of accountability because each one of us. We all have a role to play in building a new culture in the South African National Defence Force, a new culture in South Africa, a new man, soldier of the inalienable right of women. Safety is not only what we do, but also what we not do, for which we are accountable, as Molia has said. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Shisanu. I have been informed that we have been able to establish communication with Yasmin Sugam.
Thank you. Minister, Ma'am Toko, and honored guests, as the Secretary General said in the report, the Security Council last year, sexual exploitation and abuse are not inevitable, and that the majority of uniformed civilian personnel across more than 30 United Nations peacekeeping entities serve with professionalism and dedication, often in the most dangerous environments. But when violations occur, they harm those whom we seek to assist and protect, and tarnish values enshrined in our Constitution and the Charter of the United Nations. And our concern should be about ensuring that in dealing with sexual exploitation and abuse, we promote the rights and dignity of victims, we end impunity, and we build partnerships with civil society and ensure policies for education, openness, and transparency. As someone who investigated allegations of sexual exploitation and abuse in the Central African Republic with the United Nations, I welcome the steps taken by the Minister of Defense to establish the Ministerial Independent Task Team to investigate both SEER in the Defense Force and gender-based violence. No country wants to be shamed by the actions of a few which tarnish the work of the majority of our peacekeepers. It's also challenging when that behavior manifests internally as well, And I know from my engagement with Namtoko and the task team that they went into great lengths in order to encourage members to come forward to provide testimony. They have done an incredible job, but we all need to acknowledge that we are not home on these issues. It's important that we not characterize sexual exploitation and abuse and domestic violence as the work of a few bad apples. We have to acknowledge that this owes its origins to a culture of patriarchy, which the task team has spoken eloquently to, and this needs addressing. We need to create safe spaces for women and those who are abused to come forward without fear of being intimidated or threatened. The vexed question of transsexual sex, which is a major issue in the DRC, is something we need to address. We want to have a zero policy in practice. But I want to pay tribute to the minister who was determined to do something about the allegations and also for ensuring that this historic report is made public. Congratulations to the task team for their hard work. However, this is just the beginning, and the next steps for transformation are really important. And in this context, implementing the recommendations are going to be critical. Our men and women who serve abroad do so proudly. But if we want to be proud of them, and if we want not to be shamed by allegations of sexual exploitation and abuse, then we need to ensure that the recommendations of the task team are implemented, because this is the most sincere way of ensuring that we pay tribute to the victims who are at home and in many countries as well. Thank you to all of you.
Thank you very much, Yasmin. We are now going to proceed to request the Minister of Defense, who is going to render a keynote address for us today. If the Minister may please come forth.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. You may be seated. Thank you. Thank you very much to all the speakers. Those who came through the virtual platform, but also the speakers who are here this morning with us. I want to start by acknowledging the Secretary for Defense, Ambassador Kuju, represented by Dr. Kamete, the Chief of the South African National Defense Force, Gerald Shoke, Chairperson and members of the Ministerial Task Team, members of the Defense Commission led by Mr. Ian Robertson, our military ombuds who is in our midst, the CEO of AMSCO, and maybe actually we should have extended the team to investigate something there in that environment. Members of the Plenary Defense Staff Council and the entire Defense Department, representatives of stakeholders, ladies and gentlemen, I must say that I'm heartened to officiate at this occasion where we are having an engagement on the release of the report of the Ministerial Task Team on Sexual Exploitation and Abuse. We are undertaking this launch as we mark International Women's Day. And I want to say happy International Women's Day to all the women who are here. It is opportune that we conduct this as we are also on the national state of disaster at level 1 and thus able to have this gathering. Furthermore, we are engaging at a time when our country has adopted the National Action Plan on Women late in 2020 in Cabinet. I commissioned the MTT on sexual exploitation and abuse late on the 1st of December 2019. And this mission has ended end of December 2020. This was solely with the mandate to conduct investigations into sexual exploitation and abuse, and was continually reported in the mission, which were continuously reported in mission areas externally, but also within the South African National Defence Force itself. The members of the task team, Ms. Toko Pumloana, who is also a former member and the chairperson of the Gender Commission of the Republic of South Africa, has done extremely well. Madam Mpumloana had a team, a collective around her, consisting of Professor Cheryl Hendricks, Major General retired Nodola, Dr. Goma, and Ms. Britta Hoff-Rotman. Now, the task team's composition, indeed, as Madam Professor Shisana has already said, was drawn from a wide range of expertise and experience. Of course, on matters of gender and advocacy, from the academia and the military, from the legalists, and indeed it was a very balanced team and provided a diversity of views, resulting in a solid report which reflects the work they've undertaken during their tenure. Colleagues, if some of what I say here is that it will be a repetition of some of the things which have been raised by Professor Shisana, I'm aware that Professor Shisana, in her capacity as the advisor to the President, did touch on some of the matters which I am touching on this morning. What sparked this? You know, I've been attending annual sessions of the UN in New York, and I've been confronted by its Department of Peacekeeping Operations, the DPKO. I do not recall a single time when I've interacted with them when the matter of sexual exploitation and abuse has not been raised. What worried me even more is that they would raise that South Africa, you are very good in reporting these cases as you report to the UN. And we see that you are acting on these matters. However, when we look at the penalties you impose on the perpetrators, they are inadequate. And I kept on engaging on these matters until one day I was watching Al Jazeera and I saw a program of women military veterans of the US who were being interviewed by Al Jazeera, and I think the program had been running on CNN as well. Elderly women, veterans of the Vietnamese War, some of them veterans of the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I listened to their experiences as women and what they've had to endure serving in the front line with their own colleagues from the US Defense Force. I watched their faces and I saw a lot of pain as they were coming up and talking about their own experiences in the hands of their colleagues. And maybe it took me back to my younger days. I'm a military veteran. I've lived with over 1,000 men in a camp. And I could identify with what those women, military veterans, were saying. I could identify with some of the personal experiences and even utterances which men above you would make to you in advancing their selfish interests. I could identify with that. And I could identify with the pain. And I decided that we will not walk away from the Defense Force without investigating the cases which have come to my attention, so that we act, so that we work together with other criminal justice departments to deal with such matters. And I want to thank you, Chairperson, that you made a recommendation that one of the things we need to do is to engage with the NPA because it has a sexual offenses group within it. And I must say that that team has really assisted us already in a case which we've been dealing with in the past week. And I hear, as you said, I think you said this here, that the witness came out better than she would have come out if she had not received that support. We thank you for that. Now, the other experience which sparked this was an interaction with a young woman from the Defense Force who had just returned from a deployment to the Democratic Republic of Congo. This young girl threatened to take her life. And the reason why she threatened to take her life was because she felt that her case was not receiving the necessary attention. She had spoken out, she had come forward, and she wanted us to act on the matter. But of course then, that having happened in the mission area, when the investigation was not happening as fast enough, she became desperate, she became frustrated, and indeed she did attempt to commit suicide. Now, this is somebody who had been continuously sexually assaulted by a senior officer. Now, on coming back on her return, the family could not believe it and did not understand how it could be allowed to happen with such impunity. So I met with a young lady and we had a thorough discussion, a good conversation on the matter. And as I walked out of that house, I knew exactly that it can't be that you receive reports, that yes, you read the reports, yes, you'll get an explanation about things which have been done, but in fact, you rely solely on the reports that has been presented to you, and therefore, one needed to dig deeper to understand exactly the psyche of the people we are referring to and what it is which has been done to deal with this matter. We did. We've succeeded because from that day when we developed the terms of reference, which I gave to the MTT, to look at reporting, management, and finalization of cases of sexual harassment. I must say, now we have an outcome. We now have a report which is presented to us. The chairperson mentioned earlier on that in a number of cases, I have a long list, I have a long register of these cases. It is not, and this is what I raised with the MCC and the chief, it is not that you've not acted. And I must say that we appreciate that you have taken action against those who have committed this kind of crime. The issue at hand is the penalties which you have imposed on the perpetrators. Because if you are going to impose a penalty of a fine, let's say $1,000 or $6,000, that's nothing to a soldier who is deployed, who is receiving an allowance in US dollars in the Democratic Republic of Congo, for instance. So, we welcome, we appreciate that you have taken action when these incidents have been reported. And we are saying, however, the penalties imposed are not strong enough to serve as a deterrent. I'm raising this because I know that a number of people were saying, but we've been dealing with these issues over a long, I know the Adjutant General, but we've been dealing with these, Minister. I know you've been dealing with them. But is it enough? No, it isn't enough, because this has not, your penalties have not served to deter officers from doing some of the things which they are doing right now. One of the things which the UN appreciated about South Africa, which they continue to appreciate, is our ability to deploy national investigating officers to the mission areas. I should say this, because I don't want you to feel as though there is no appreciation of the work which you have done. One of the things, and we are the only ones, by the way, who are doing it, is that you deploy your national investigating officers and you conduct a court in the mission area, which allows for the victims of abuse to come forward and testify. Good enough, but again, the penalties, zilch. Now, so when we were engaging with the Ministerial Task Team earlier on, we said one of the things we need to do is to analyze the efficacy of our current legislation related to the aforementioned and make proposals for enhancement. I know that the Chief has made reference, and other speakers too, on the military disciplinary bill. Military discipline bill? Yes. Unfortunately, and I should say this, that this bill has been in the pipeline for 10 years, I think. When I joined the Defence Force, the bill was already in the pipeline. I think it was at that point with the Department of Justice, state law advisors. Finally, we took it to Parliament. And when the bill was presented, there were voices from within the Department of Defense who came forward to say they are not satisfied with the process of consultation. It had not been adequate. So we then withdrew that bill, and that bill right now is being dealt with internally. But the point I want to raise is, colleagues, it shouldn't take us a long time to do that. Because it means if we don't do that as quickly as possible, we are going to run into problems. I like that bill. It has very steep penalties for all manner of crimes within the Defence Force. But also it's going to strengthen the hand of commanders on the ground with regards to command and control. Because part of the problem we have here is that matters are taken to the immediate commanders and people never act, or they don't even take those matters forward. I'm now talking about the units here in South Africa. I had a very strange experience. I'll call it strange because I was attending a pass-out parade in one of the bases. And the night before, when I was receiving a briefing about the situation in the base, I was informed that a young girl had been raped by two of her colleagues, also trainees, and that as they were preparing for the pass-out parade the following day, that the two young men were going to be on the parade, but the young girl wouldn't be able to be part of that process because of some of the processes she was going through as a result of what had happened to her. That was strange to me. Very strange, because how do you allow the two men, the perpetrators of this violence on the woman, to go on a parade, pass out, and be soldiers, recognized soldiers in the Defence Force? And the young woman who's a victim, because of what had happened to her, wasn't going to be able to stand there and be part of the parade because of the challenges she had at the time. So we then had to take a quick decision. I said, no, the two men must withdraw. These guys must withdraw until the court processes have been concluded. So I'm just using that as just the one. And I must say that I really commend the colonel who was commanding, was the OC in that facility at the time. I'm aware now, I think he's a general. I saw him the list, which we signed off 2 weeks ago. I think he's now a general. But the fact that he had the courage, as he was reporting about the state of affairs at the base, to report on that particular incident really gave me a lot of confidence in his leadership ability. Now, one of the areas which the MTT had to zoom into within the Defence Force is that within the military police, military prosecutions, technical training and expertise, and sensitivity to deal with cases of sexual exploitation and abuse. And what has come out in the recommendations is that we need to develop a system that is going to be victim-centered. For now, it hasn't come out that way. For now, there is no indication that the focus usually is on the victim. It is rather on what it is that we are going to do to the perpetrator, ignoring completely the trauma which the victim has gone through. And of course, I want to say this, colleagues, which is, and I think Mrs. Toko helped me here because I was a bit frustrated a few days ago when I heard that one of the victims had not rocked up in court and could not be reached. And I said, but what is this? And then she said, no, please understand. There is that challenge that at times victims do not want to confront the perpetrators. They flee. And it is one of those issues which we have to deal with in the Defence Force, because at the end of the day, if this woman is here in the Defence Force and the perpetrator is also here in the Defence Force, actually, I should also say, if a young man is also here and is sexually abused by another, a colleague here, there is no way in which you can have a productive manner of doing things, a productive approach to anything which that woman does, because the woman is going through trauma and the woman sees the perpetrator every day in the environment where the woman is. So we've got to move, and one of those is suspension of people. Fortunately, in a democracy, I'm saying fortunate, not that I approve of it, because I know there was a time when the chief took a decision and we fired people without even following a single one of the rules. That's how frustrated we were. A group of people who were coming back from the Democratic Republic of Congo for misconduct. And the chief took a decision on the spot that these ones must go. And of course, because South Africa has an advanced constitution, a democracy, we lost it in the courts and were instructed to bring them back. But if you listened to what they had done, the kind of misconduct, it talks amongst others to this sort of behavior which we are addressing here today. So what is important is, I'm saying fortunate, even as you suspend, South Africa says you suspend, but with pay. What we should not be allowing to happen is the continued presence of the person in an environment where the victim is. And I want to emphasize that because the Defence Force, yes, it's big numbers, but it's a very small family. So it's easy to bump into one another. There is a recommendation which has been made here, which talks to an establishment of a sexual misconduct center. And I know that from the side of CHR, I'm sure what came to your mind immediately is, where are we going to get the resources? Because already we have a deficit in our compensation of employees allocation. However, I was just whispering and saying, to demonstrate seriousness in dealing with these cases, I know that you would look at it and say the Sexual Misconduct Center should be a long-term. No, it has to be a immediate-term goal which we set ourselves. And I believe that from within the Defence Force, we can actually identify people, if needs be, demilitarize and establish using the same allocation and engage with DPSA and get ourselves to establish the Sexual Misconduct Center. Because once we have the Sexual Misconduct Center, it will demonstrate to every victim that indeed the priority now is given and attention to the victims of sexual exploitation. I'm happy that we've been able to establish the paternity nodal point. I'm also happy that the Defense Force has established what is called the DNA data bank. And by the way, the UN is very happy about this. DPKO is very excited about this, and they are saying other countries should take note of the best practices which we are adopting. But I'm equally aware of your frustration where, when you follow up on some of those paternity cases, how the other governments in those countries have frustrated our efforts. But what is important is that we need to finalize. I know that there is frustration with regards to the DRC. But marginal bantwana, some of them. Some of them are 13-year-olds, kudala nipha. And the children are old. So what we do is to, in the memorandum of understanding of the work which we do with the Democratic Republic of Congo, they should accept that we have these challenges, and therefore we may request them to assist us, because it doesn't help if a woman comes forward with a child and thereafter disappears, and the government does not provide that woman with the necessary support to follow up on issues of paternity tests and paternity of the child. So that's one of the things, Chief, which Jayazba, you remind me all the time that Minister, ngiyahamba end of May mina manje. But I really believe there are some things which you'd be able to put in place even before you leave. Of course, you'll be leaving a team, because you don't take decisions alone, you take decisions with a collective. Now, what I don't think people understand is the negative reporting which comes with cases of sexual exploitation and abuse. The negative reporting about the country, South Africa. People will say all good things. We have a very good constitution, we have very good policies. However, there is this matter which remains a sore point for South Africa. So it's a matter which we have to deal with. I'm happy that the MTT made all efforts to go to as many of the parts of our country as possible. I think some of the bases they visited are bases which I've not visited myself. And I'm happy as well that they've also visited some of our academic institutions. And I want to say, Chair, thank you. Thank you for your visit, amongst others, to Saldanha Military Academy. And I know right now that the Chief is dealing with the matters which you have put before us. I'm also I greatly appreciate the fact that you've established the toll-free hotline for victims, and that I trust that generals sitting at this table, that hotline will continue. This was not a hotline, General Shabane, which was meant to serve the MTT. It was a hotline which was meant to serve the victims. Victims are still there. The MTT will be going, but the victims remain, the perpetrators remain. Last week, I had an opportunity of interacting with a mother of a victim. And I don't want to say of sexual abuse, I want to say of rape. In my office in Waterkloof. But what struck me was the pain, the agony, the tears of the mother, even before I have interacted with a young girl. And just how helpless she feels about this situation. And I had to reassure her that even without the MTT, we will pursue this inquiry. But there's something else I want to make a plea to you about. I am aware that amongst yourselves, officers, generals in particular, senior women, there are those of you who negotiate with these girls to cancel these cases. Yes, Sis Togo? A young girl comes forward, a young girl is ready to talk, and a senior general above her decides, but why are you doing this? Why should you do? Why are you doing down so-and-so? Why are you destroying this person? Let's not do that. Allow for the investigation to be conducted. If allegations are proven to be untrue, then of course it will come out. But to say, don't do that, it is incorrect. I also do want to make a plea that, I've seen it in the basis, because I think one of the cases I've referred to, the reason why the girl was quick and actually remained on course and was more confident to speak out, it is because of the therapy, the counseling she received from us, our psychologists on site. And what am I saying, therefore? SAMS should make sure whenever you have warm bodies, men and women in uniform, you must have psychologists, particularly where young people are training, so that the girl child has the confidence to speak out, to report a case to their supervisors. Now, I'm making specific reference here to areas such as Oldson. I'm making a reference to Woodspruit. Woodspruit is equally as rotten. And one of the things, I'm glad you are here, General Mapoto, is that you? Because one of the things we've agreed to with the chief is that within your unit, your military police, the chief says we must establish a sexual investigating unit within your team. It must be done. It has to be done. And of course, we must have a multi-sectoral approach to it. That which is not harassment, that which is rape, must be called rape. It shouldn't be said it was sexual harassment of a woman. It was rape of a woman. So with regards to that, obviously, it would have to go to a civilian court. So I'm just saying, Adjutant General, if you are here, that these are some of the matters we now need to look into, what remains here with you and what goes out to the civilian courts. But of course, we need to realign and make sure that our penal system is exactly the same as that which you find out in civilian courts. I've been gratified to learn that the MTT had found that of the 21 cases of sexual exploitation and abuse reported, including allegations of rape, transactional sex, sexual abuse and exploitative relationship during deployment. 15 of those cases were finalized, resulting in dismissals from the SANDF. I think when you do it, you need to understand, and I always say, I cannot imagine you, colleagues, that you are here in the Defense Force, and sometimes up to 20, 25 years, some of you, I think, have been here. And within just for a few seconds, your entire career goes down the drain. It is flushed down the drain because you could not exercise control. I can't imagine. It's very sad, very painful. And I've often asked, when you get home and you have to explain this to your family, what do you say? Why have you been fired from the Defense Force? And you have to say, I was fired from the Defense Force because I did A, B, C, D, and E. Scandalous. So I'm then appealing to all of us to continue at the rate at which we are now moving with regards to these issues. Singabuye umva. Asingabuye nomva. Irrespective of whether the Minister of Defense in this person is here tomorrow or not, my appeal is that we continue, we establish and implement all the recommendations which have been presented to us, because it's not about me who established the MTT. It is about the victims amongst yourselves. I'm happy to hear what you have said, Ms. Gamed, Dr. Gamed, that the implementation of these recommendations will be an area of interest by way of monitoring and evaluation. Because it is true, even to follow up cases, that sometimes you become aware of a particular case as a minister, but you will not have the capacity to follow up all these kinds of cases and how they are dealt with, and even that all the recommendations which have been made to us, you don't have the capacity as minister to do that. You rely on your foot soldiers to do that work and report. So I'm happy to hear you committing yourself to monitoring this particular area of work, whether these recommendations are being implemented or not. We cannot continue to proclaim the SANDF as a disciplined force when there are acts of sexual exploitation and abuse within and even outside of the SANDF, which we have not dealt with adequately. We can't. The first time I had a discussion, the Commander-in-Chief, I had a discussion with him about these matters. And I was saying, I think I was coming from New York, and I said, there's this issue of sexual exploitation and abuse. We're acting, we're doing this, and I was very frustrated. But what I had not done was to zoom into the penalties. So it was enough for me to know that, yes, a woman had been abused, the woman came forward, and yes, we've acted, and not zoom in on the penalties imposed by our courts. So let's do that. Let's do that. And there was a question whether we will release the report. As far as I'm concerned, the report is released. We are releasing the report because the report is a straightforward report. It makes a statement of fact, it makes findings, and it makes recommendations. That's what the report does here. I've not seen a report as yet printed for this purpose, which contains names of people against whom allegations have been made? No. We have a list, I do. I know that the Adjutant General is dealing with those issues, but we cannot, if you hold back this report and not distribute this report, people will think that it was a fanfare kind of event. We said we were launching a report, but in fact we are not ready to give the report to South Africans. Let's give the report to South Africans because we have nothing to hide. That which would have been under the carpet is that which now has come out because the MTT has investigated those matters. Allow me to equally commend our team of women peacekeepers. Our women have done very well in peacekeeping. And I know that our women who have been deployed together with men in peacekeeping, some of them have made interventions when these sorts of things have been reported. I want to commend all of you because I have listened to your stories. I have listened to your testimonies about work which you do now as women, as mothers, who are sent out into mission areas for deployment. I know the projects you have embarked upon. And I had said I would be happy if Joint Ops could follow up on some of those projects which women in peacekeeping have launched in mission areas, supporting orphans, for instance. I would like us to follow up on those matters. Now, Chief, I want to thank you for the support you have given to the MTT. And I know that when you committed to give this support right from the beginning, not everybody, even within your council, had bought into it. But the brave soldier you are, you commanded from the front, you led from the front. And I think I should commend you for that because I think the rest took note, a lesson from what you were doing, because you received regular reports from the MTT and you commanded your forces to follow suit and work and cooperate with the MTT. So for that, I must commend you. Brigadier General Soldat, who formed part of the Secretariat of the MTT, thank you. Thank you, and I say this wholeheartedly because I know that when you are a general still serving, and you then have to find yourself in a space where you must provide assistance and support to a team which is investigating transgressions within the Defense Force. It must have been very difficult for you. But you did not hesitate. You've been there throughout. Thank you. My gratitude also goes to the entire Ministerial task team. I know there were times when I interact with them, you could tell, you could see the trauma, you could read the trauma in their faces from stories. They were hearing things, they were picking up. And I know that at some point we had to say they need to go through some kind of therapy. I want to thank you for being patient with us. I want to thank you for being brutally frank with us. I also want to thank you for sticking out with us to the last, that today we are launching a report. A report it's not presented by me, a report which you took the floor and presented to this forum. I really am grateful for that. Thank you. So tomorrow, when history of South Africa is written about what is happening, or the transformation, continued transformation within the armed forces, at least we will go down as a team that went on to investigate transgressions against women with specific reference to sexual crimes. I repeat what I listened to, what I saw in the faces of the victims. Anyone, you can get that thing, get from Al Jazeera and listen to that video of quite matured women, elderly women, talking about first-hand experience in the hands of their own colleagues. And you will appreciate what we are talking about. So I'm grateful for the work you have done. You've prepared a very comprehensive report for us. I believe the ball is in the court of these generals who are sitting here. It's in your court, guys. It's for you now to start running and implement that which you are able to implement. We look at, my understanding was that there was a workshop. It's clear there are immediate short-term goals, there are immediate, there are those long-term. I believe others have been implemented already during the course of their work. There are things which can be done immediately. I want to commit to this forum here that this report will not gather dust in the offices. It will be made a constant feature of the highest decision-making structure, which I chair, the Council on Defense, with regular reports on progress. This is possible to do. Last but not least, as I take leave, colleagues, Ms. Toko mentioned here that we probably need a period of, you said amnesty and pardon? Did you say? Yes. Amnesty, which will allow for people to come forward. In fact, as you were embarking on this investigation, there was a time when I was praying and wishing that those who know may be implicated in such transgressions, that they would come forward to the chief themselves and say, I'm likely to be affected by A, B, C, D, and E. Well, we've not had that. But the good thing is, we now know as well that we do have serial offenders. We do have serial offenders. We do. And the only way of dealing with that is for us to engage on it and take action. Thank you very much, colleagues. Thank you. Thank you for cooperating with the MTT. Thank you for providing them with support they needed. Thank you for allowing them to access the bases and allow for people to speak freely to them. I want to thank you for that. And I want to say, Chief, your next critical assignment as the Defence Force is to deliver the land to the people of South Africa. To deliver the land to the people, generally, ndiyabona indlela endijonge ngayo uba uyatsho uba sephambene ngoku. No, the people of South Africa are demanding that which they were fighting for. And one of those demands is land. Giving the people of South Africa some land. You can't be keeping everything. Give South Africans land. That is your next assignment, Chief Shoke, before the deadline of May 2020, last day. Thank you very much, colleagues.
We may be seated, please. We have now reached the end of our program, and mine really, after the Minister has spoken, is to be very brief. I would like to request the chaplain to just come a bit closer so that he can do a grace for us before we indulge. But before I get there, I'm also going to request the Hawk to assist me with the bit of intimations, just when I'm finished with the vote of thanks. To the Minister of Defense and Military Veterans, Minister Nosiviwe Mapisa Ngakula, Sithi Imazaneto Lemem, siyabulela kakhulu. To the chairperson of the task team, we thank you so much for the sterling work that you have done. And as the organization and the people, we shall endeavor to support our chief in making sure that the recommendations of the task team, they come to fruition. To the chief of the South African National Defence Force and all the members that are present here today, those who have participated here with us, and those that were on virtual, we thank you so much. And to the plenary team that really organized this function for the minister today, Sibamangazo Zozbini, to CLOG in particular, the log formation, we are very grateful for all the arrangement that has been made here for us. And to the media as well, thank you very much. And we have prepared refreshments. I'm just going to request that we continue to observe the COVID-19 protocols. And I thank you so much and how you have carried yourself. You've been a wonderful companion to the minister today. Thank you so much. We will just then allow the minister that table to go and dish first, and then all of us we will rest. It is requested that the minister and the chairperson of the task team would join the Hawk outside for a media briefing right now when the chaplain is finished to say grace for us. Thank you very much. I trust that you will have a fruitful day going forward. Thank you so much.